This episode was brought to you by Alpha House of Fashion, specialists in African and English wear, wedding gowns, corporate wear, embroidery designs and logos. Baseline Media Intellects, bringing your vision to life with lighting, sound and rigging, all to a professional degree. And Batch by ZAHRA, generous servings of authentic Pakistani burfis, brownies and bakes at an unbeatable price. Enjoy. إن الحمد لله وكفاه والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباد الله الذين ارتضى ومن بهداه من اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة الطفى وبعد فسلام الله على القوم أهلا وسهلا بكم. Welcome to the final episode of the Scholar and the Student podcast, Botswana's first Muslim podcast for the year of 2022. That is when we're recording it on the last day of 2022. It might be released in the year 2023, but it's all great nonetheless. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, one and all, to this very special occasion. Tonight's guest for me, it's nighttime here, is someone I've been interacting with for a very long time, a close friend of mine, virtually, if I may add. And if you've been paying close attention to the YouTube channel, he leaves a comment on practically every single video, or almost every single video there is. That just goes to show how much he is in support of this. And we've been skirting this idea for a very long time that, you know, you support me, I support your project as well, and we'll get into that. So why don't you come on and show the world who you are? Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you and allow him to give a better description of what he does. For our brother all the way from the US of A, inshallah soon to be world-renowned mangaka, Kaito Lumiere. Assalamu alaikum, bro. How are you doing?
Walaikum salam, and thank you for the huge introduction. Not necessary. I'm still so small, but I appreciate it. It's an honor to be on here, first of all. You've got some big names in your videos, so this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So about myself, I've been working on a manga for the last year and a half now. It's called Sacrifice, and it kind of came about from the lack of Muslim representation in anime manga. It was just we weren't seeing what we wanted to see, so I kind of was like, let's put something traditional, something with roots, and put it out there and see how it goes. And yeah, that's how that came about. Yeah, what else do you want to go into?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting way to start things off, that you have your own manga. I'm curious, by the way, before we get into more about yourself and how we got to writing manga or drawing, illustrating manga, whatever the proper term is, were you familiar with, I believe it's called, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and if I'm not confusing two things, there was once upon a time something on Muslim Matters, the famous blog. It was called the Muslim Manga Project. And I remember seeing Muslim Matters as a blog page, right? So I remember seeing an entry for that, and it got shut down really bad because, images are haram. And so the saying goes. And then today on Instagram, there's another page called the Muslim Manga Project. And I'm not sure if it's the exact same thing that I saw back then, or if it's something completely different, because that's not exactly a unique name, Muslim Manga Project. So I'm curious to know whether you read that article on Muslim Matters. That was in 2012, I want to say, if not before. And I'm sure yourself, being an illustrator, you've received similar backlash. How did you deal with it, and what's your approach to this sort of thing?
So for that article, I haven't read it, but I do recall around that time period, and it may be the same page because the art style, I recall the art style was very that chibi anime-esque. And it might be the same guy. So I would assume it's the same. It could be different, but I think they're based out, could be Malaysia.
I think so, yeah, something like that, yeah.
Or yeah, okay, yeah, could be the same guy, because I do remember. So I heard people talking about it, saw it on some threads, but yeah. So I know a lot of people will say like, oh, drawing's haram and stuff unless you're doing nature or things of that like just no people. and it's definitely just one opinion. I mean, I don't even know if I could call it popular. I don't have the authority to say, but I know there's a lot of varying degrees of this. I mean, during the early days of Islam, we had a lot of Islamic art paintings that depicted the Sahaba, the Prophet, even Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So, and I think this came about later with the fear of people worshiping these things. So I don't know that it actually, in the very beginning, was, hearken, like, oh, don't. We have hadith on Aisha, she would carve out little statues and of animals and such. So I don't know, art and Islam to me, they've been together from the beginning, especially within architecture. There's they popularized adding detail to every facade you see on a building. You find any old mosque from that time period versus which would also use calligraphy to look like, images themselves. So to me, art and Islam, they go hand in hand. There's just, you can't call it haram.
Yeah,
especially with the
absolutely.
historical context.
Yeah, very beautifully put. And yeah, go on, bro.
Yeah, I was gonna say I received very little backlash. I've seen like a couple, saying like, "Oh, you can't be doing this," but I kind of just ignore it. I just, everybody's got their view, everybody's got their opinion. You have to move on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's only so much. I was going to use a few expletives, but I'm trying to be family friendly. There's so much so much water you can let into your boat before it actually capsizes. So we have to be mindful of these things.
For sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting you brought up architecture because I once had the privilege right here in Gaborone, Botswana, of interacting with Aerosol Ali. He's from Birmingham, UK. So yeah, Mufti Abu Late's neighbor for all I care. Yeah, I know they follow each other, so I don't know if they've met physically, but yeah, he was here once for a little show thing that he was doing, and he mentioned this that really stuck with me. I remember it until today. He said that the ancient Muslims, or whatever you call them, when they were doing their architecture, when they had these patterns, they were very elaborate, very beautiful, mathematical even. And they would do that, but intentionally they'd put a mistake somewhere in there that the keen eye would be able to pick up. And they'd do that intentionally for this reason, to say that, yes, this is a great illustration, it's a great design, but the best designer is Allah. And we just wanted to remind you of that by putting this kink in the work. So that was an amazing.
I never knew that.
Yeah, it's also, it was amazing for me when I heard it for the first time. And it just goes to show how amazing these people were and how they used their art form as dawah, practically, reminding people about the greatness of Allah, which is essentially what dawah is, isn't it? So yeah, and it's saddening to see that in that show itself, Aerosol Ali was not given the best of treatment because, well, he doesn't really do human images. He does more like aerosol painting, so it's more abstract art. But then there was this air of what the hell is going on here? Because people genuinely didn't understand art. And he said a few things that went over people's heads. He talked about the need for Muslims in any community to document their achievements and their history, even if it's not a practical museum, because I know he's done a lot of work with museums in the UK. At least we can document this era of our history and look back, or our generations who come after us, they will look back and say, hey, that's what our parents and grandparents are up to. And then he also talked about Muslims and how they needed to venture into avenues such as film and see how we can, have proper representation. Absolutely. And, it's interesting because my other teacher, Sheikh Muhammad Alshareef, may Allah have mercy on his soul, he used to give this example. He's like, imagine if HBO or BBC or some other big shot company came to you today and they said, we're going to give you, the Muslim guys, we're going to give you primetime slots on TV to have your own TV series or your own movie that depicts Islam in a good light. Do you have a good idea of what you're going to do? And if your answer is no, then that shows you how much we've been lacking on this side of the arts and actually pursuing this to be not only a viable career necessarily, but to be used as a force for good. And there are so many other scholars in our contemporary times, we've talked about the importance for this. And I don't know if you remember, what was that series with Sheikh Omar Suleiman and Muhammad Ziyara? Used to be on YouTube. They had like 2 seasons of it, and it was just about everyday Muslim stuff, but it was really well produced by Mohammed, I think Bayezid is his name. And yeah, stuff like that is stuff that we need to see more of. And it's unfortunate that people aren't really paying attention to it. But that's why this podcast is here as well, to give space for people like yourself, people like Muhammad Ali from Birmingham, and people like Brother Talib Razi and all that. But at the same time, to sort of balance this discussion, I understand that there are elements of art which are nefarious. And spoiler alert for the audience, Brother Kaito here actually does have a child. So there are things in certain forms of art which are not family friendly. So how do you as a Muslim navigate that sort of stuff? Because even if something isn't family friendly, perhaps it's not something that you deem appropriate to consume, or it might not be deemed appropriate by the community to consume. So how do you navigate around those sorts of things? And what's your approach to it in general? And obviously, there's also the element of we enjoy certain things, but our kids aren't ready for that. So how do you approach that?
So in terms of mature content, I would like to keep my child away from it, especially at her age. She's just over 1 now. So whatever she puts on TV, I'll, do some research, do some quick Google searching, make sure there's no things I don't want her to see in it, and which is kind of difficult now in America with like everything's just shown any time of the day nowadays. So there's that. Although I think when she's older, it'll be kind of up to her what she consumes. Obviously, there's like hard limits at some degree, but especially I think like at 16, you're kind of like getting into yourself, and you kind of have to navigate some of that stuff, and otherwise she won't grow. And I think a lot of issues we're seeing in America right now is people are just exposed to too much too young, and then they're babied as they get older. So as for myself, I'll watch things like Game of Thrones, and I would say, knowing some of that is haram, what they're showing, what they're saying, but I think, I don't know, it's a tricky line to balance, and it's a subject that I know most people would want to take the high road and say, oh, we stay away from it, but sometimes I think if you are viewing it with like a clear mind, it is what it is. It's what's in here. What are you going into it to see that stuff? Are you going into it for the story? It just happens to be on screen. Maybe you could look away, or so there's that. And that being said, my work personally right now would be mature content. There's going to be violence. There's going to be very adult themes in there that I want to tackle. And right now, I don't think I've done anything that I would myself consider like, oh, haram on paper. It should not be shown like that. Would I ever get to that point? I don't know. I can't say for sure. I think because when you get into art, it's super tricky. And I think like any artist will tell you, even with like music, when you cross the line, when don't you, because you want to give a certain impact and feeling to people. And sometimes you have to cross a line just to get an impact and reaction. And sometimes crossing that line does help the story. So I'll see when I get there. But right now, I think it's just tame enough, but still too mature for a kid or something to look at.
Yeah.
How would you, I guess, you ask yourself that question? I'm curious what you would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, I'd like to appreciate your honesty about it, that you understand that there's a sort of dilemma and there are lines that may or may not have to be crossed. And just having the maturity or the vulnerability to say, yo, that's something that actually exists and is something that I'm actively struggling with, is not something that many people would do. And that usually leads to a lot of problems down the road. And it leads to a lot of I think, what we can call takfirism, as in, yeah, if I do it, it's okay, but then if you do it, you're out of the fold of Islam. Or if I do it, there's a whole justification, but if you do it or he does it, then it's definitely haram and you're definitely not Muslim anymore. So at least, alhamdulillah, we're weeding that out from the beginning. As to what exactly I would do, that is a good question, and there are varying degrees in terms of it as well. So, for example, I want to ask this question to a couple of scholars of Islam, a couple of ulama as well. So far on my show, when it comes to music, I'll speak about music since that's sort of my scene. And when it comes to the arts, I guess that's been somewhat my contribution, although it's been more poetry. But okay, yeah, I'm from the music scene, TLDR. So when I had Celt Islam on, that was the final episode for season 2 of the Scholar and the Student podcast. He's played at Glastonbury, and most of his music doesn't actually have lyrics in it. So it's like EDM sort of. He calls it electropunk, but it's more of your dubstep sort of thing. So if there are vocals, it's not going to have any lyrics, or it'll have just one sentence in it that's looped. So it's the stuff that, what he said, if you listen to that interview, it's stuff that you'd hear at a rave, for example. And he doesn't have an issue with profanity because that's how common people talk. I mean, that's, especially him being a white Englishman, that's just how his people talk. So for you to create art for your people, and in this case, well, when I say his people, not to be racist, but the average English person on the street who isn't as sophisticated as some posh git or the Queen or something, the average English person does not refine their adab or their etiquette, so to speak. So that's their way of speaking. Right. So if you want to relate to them, then you sort of have to speak like that. And there are other scholarly opinions as well. I mean, there's a difference between swearing because you're stuck in traffic, oh, there's damn traffic or something, and then there's another way of doing it where you call someone you call someone a son of a female dog and this and this and that. So you're clearly bringing someone down, and that, I mean, is something that we should definitely refrain from. So yeah, it's a bit of a tightrope for me to walk as well. And like I said, I have to explicitly ask some of my own teachers about it and what they do, including some other people who've studied Islam more than me and gone into music and the arts more than myself, so that I can have a sort of clearer picture. I'm not saying I'm downplaying what Celt Islam has said. He's my brother. He spent so much time with Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Sufi, rahimahullah, may Allah have mercy on his soul. So him having spent all that time in the company of such an erudite sheikh, I don't think that, okay, he makes mistakes. We all make mistakes, but surely he knows what he's talking about. I would really rate him when it comes to that. At the same time, I do want to learn more about it and see where this journey takes us. And also on that point, it was just yesterday when I was with Sidi Iqbal, and I'm sure he's no stranger to many Malikis in the Western Hemisphere, because he's the ustad of myself and many other people, including Mufti Abu Layth from back in the days. So he's not a small guy. So we were discussing other things, but then he came to this whole point that we as human beings don't have a right to call someone else a disbeliever, chuck them out of the fold of Islam. Oh, you did that. You are out of the fold of Islam and stuff like that. By the way, the K word, which I'm trying not to use, is a racial slur in my part of the world. So I know it's in the Quran as well. It has a very specific meaning. It means disbeliever, but around here it's like the N word in America, except no one actually owned it. So I'm trying not to use that word. So
gotcha.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah,
Besides, back then they wouldn't allow people to use that word anyway.
Yeah,
it was something, even with the word haram, that was like reserved only for the scholars. Like, absolutely. Nowadays, everybody's throwing it around and sharing.
100%. People were definitely not qualified to do any of that. I mean,
exactly.
I studied law for I don't know how long. I studied English law, and then I had to do bar exams because I'm practicing in Botswana, and that's just like the law of a country that's existed for about 56 years. So imagine if you're talking about Islamic law, which obviously there's the Quran and the Sunnah, but then how have the scholars looked at it for the past 14 centuries? So there's
Yep.
a lot you really need to take in. Anyway, what Sidi Iqbal was
Oh yeah.
saying is that you can't say to someone that you are a disbeliever, but you can say, yo, this thing that you want to do or that you intend to do, that is an act of disbelief. Now, and you leave it at that. You don't have to go any further and say, if you do that, that means X, Y, and Z. No, you say that thing is an act of disbelief and you leave it at that. So I guess
Right.
that should be a sort of starting point for people such as yourself and myself. But there's still a lot to be unpacked from that. So I would like to ask Sidi Iqbal more about it, because you see, when Sidi Iqbal is teaching a wide array of students, oftentimes he'll give what he'll do is that he'll give the answer according to the book, but then if you go and ask him privately, I'm not saying he's deceiving anyone, and I'm not downplaying him in any way, but if he sees that you're someone of a higher understanding, then he might word his answer differently, so that'll encourage you to go and do your own research and see what other scholars have had to say about it, and maybe come to a conclusion that's different from himself. So that's one thing I like about him.
Nothing
But
wrong with that.
yeah,
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, I think.
yeah,
Especially, there's like, I think, who was it? Ibn Rushd would say something
mm,
like that. He was like, there's two Qur'ans, one for your average person and then one for the intellect. Like, because you're going to get two very, vastly different things going into it with those different mindsets. And I feel like nowadays it's expanded even more with how much we know through science and technology.
mm.
You apply that to the Quran and you're like, oh, this could mean this now. And it's, there's a, it's so broad now. It's insane, but it's part of the miracle.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of, basically what you were alluding to is everyone, when they look at the Quran, they have a sort of lens that they put on, and that sort of colors or
Mm-hmm.
shapes the way that they look at things. And that is the Quran. That is what we believe as Muslims to be the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the word of God. The thing about what I wanted to round this off to is when it comes to art as well, there's also interpretation going on. So there
Mm-hmm.
might be a certain piece of art which is more impactful to yourself because maybe it talks about tragedy, the tragedy of war. And if you're someone who has gone through a war, then that'll hit harder for you, as opposed to someone who's coming out like myself, who's never, alhamdulillah, had to face any of that. And then I just see this and then I can say, well, it does have some impact on me, but definitely not something comparable to someone who's actually been through it. So my question to you was that I'm remembering a discussion I had some years back when the first Black Panther movie came out, and then there was a Facebook group about, well, basically a bunch of people who were overtly racist, and they wanted to review bomb it and stuff like that. So, but then the argument was that isn't that the essence of art? Isn't art all about interpretation? That it might be something that's really enjoyed by someone and really hated by someone else because of their upbringing or whatever it is. So where do we draw the line in that sort of regard? I mean, Black Panther, for example, if you want to use that as an example, that clearly it struck a chord with many people, including myself growing up in Africa, and then it also rubbed others the wrong way because of their racist tendencies. So how do we juggle with something like
Mm-hmm.
that?
That's a hard question. That's a tough one, especially because there's two ways to answer it. You could be politically correct about it,
Mm,
or you can be blunt. And so, like in the United States, for example, 300 years ago, we had slaves. Had that movie come out, let's say, if they had, this is a hypothetical, it would be normal to view it as like this would be very, gross to them because they'd be like, oh, where are all these black characters being heroes and doing this, and they don't have that, and that would be accepted at that time. But now we could look at that and be like, oh, that would be a very bigoted way of thinking. So let's say there's a region, that Facebook group, gathering all these people who are racist and coming in and looking at it and hating on it. You can understand it from that point of view, but at the same time, someone who's broadened their own horizons could look at it and say, they're obviously being bigots. It's skin's just, it's just a color. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. So that's to put it honestly. And like you said, that is art is subjective, and in order to remain subjective, we have to allow critiques from all across the board, even if some are clearly, racist or something. You can brush that one aside, whatever. But so like I posted my manga I was working on, some early drafts on Reddit last year, and I asked for serious critique, and I posted it in like a manga community, and they were pretty harsh. It was eye-opening, and all it did was serve to push me and drive me to make it better. There were a couple comments saying like, oh, this wouldn't look like that and whatnot, but you kind of have to just navigate it with that in mind. Like, there's going to be people who are looking at things from all kinds of angles and try to take, it's like Islamically, we're always taught like take the best of everything. That's how you evolve. And so that would be my advice to navigate that. And it's art. You have to accept criticism. You have to handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a question I asked to a lot of people who come onto the show, and you've probably picked up on it as well. So how then do we deal with, because clearly with everything you've said now, you are not in favor of the way Hollywood is sort of going about it, in that the slightest bit of criticism gets someone fired from a role or someone cancelled. Absolutely. And then they have the hardest time getting something else in the future, or they get dropped from the show, their character gets written out. There's so many examples we can give from just the last 5 years. So if we are to take criticism, how far would we, if you're to be specific, how far would you let that criticism go? Because if, once again, the Black Panther example, if your biggest critique with that movie is the fact that the main character is black, yeah, obviously, dude, I'm not going to listen to you as the director of the film. But then if you have a genuine critique, maybe you think, oh, the film was too long, or it was too similar to that other movie that was done like this, or you've got something legitimate to say, then I think we should definitely listen to that sort of stuff, like stuff that's legitimately there for us to acknowledge and improve ourselves as artists. But then I guess the question I'm trying to pose is, what is legitimate criticism? Or at least, how do you define legitimate criticism?
I think I would define it as, and partly also you have to, I don't know, it's tough to unpack and keep it simple. It's like you said, if someone was just like, oh, too many black characters, can that really be a critique? It's kind of like, but then again, we're in a time period now where you can say that about a white movie, which I disagree with you, because it has to be all across the board. You can't be a hypocrite. So, like, I don't watch a movie and think, oh, there's way too many white characters. It depends on the context. Lord of the Rings, for example, those are probably my favorite movies of all time. And there's so few black, Asian, Arab characters, you name it. It's mostly just white characters, and it's fine. It fits the theme, it fits the story where the setting is, and so that's not answering your question though. It's hard. It's hard. I would be against canceling anyone though, because people have the right to change and people are constantly evolving. So I'm not a fan of, like, even if someone had said, oh, there's too many black characters, or I don't like it because, I'm racist to black people, he could have a change of heart. We don't know. So it is, I think you just have to take, you have to take the hits.
Care to savor some authentic Pakistani dessert? Fancy some brownies? Need a specialized package for a special event? Batch by ZAHRA has got you covered. Call or WhatsApp 74755 and get your batch now. A generous helping at an absolutely unbeatable price. Attested to be absolutely tasty by us here at The Scholar and The Student. All right. Okay, Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. So going back to yourself then, as someone who is a
Mhm.
mangaka and someone who has, you're currently publishing your, I guess it is your second official manga on Webtoons, and then the first one, which
Mhm.
was Ghost and Spirit, was completed last year. So how did you get into drawing manga in the first place? I mean, I remember even back when I was in primary school, this is in Botswana, in the little village I came from. At break time, we would all be drawing Goku Super Saiyan 600 or something, like you know how it was back in the day. Yeah, with
Oh yeah.
coming up with new Super Saiyan forms because that was the in thing. And yeah, especially after Dragon Ball
Oh
Z
yeah.
ended, we needed something to keep that fire burning. So that's basically how we survived until, well, we discovered the internet. So yeah, is that sort of similar to what happened to you? And I mean, manga is usually associated with Japan, and nowadays manhwa, if I pronounce it correctly, which is coming out from South Korea, is also rising up in the ranks.
Mhm.
So how did yourself in the US of A, which is literally on the other side of the world, get so engrossed in this art form? And why do you choose that as opposed to, I don't know, something else, such as maybe if you can
Yeah.
even draw a distinction between manga and traditional American comics? I'm doing this. So yeah,
Mhm.
what's your take on that?
So so it's interesting. I would say I hadn't seen manga, like actual manga, not until later in life. I would say like 12 years old. But I had a lot of American comic books, Spider-Man, Superman. I had like huge collection of those, and I was accustomed to that American cartoon style. And then, let's say I was probably like 6 or something. I traveled to Lebanon for the summer with my family, and I'm sure you've heard of this, Captain Magic.
Yeah, I think I have. Yes,
Okay,
pretty
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
In Japan, it's Captain Tsubasa, but at the time I
Yeah,
didn't. I
yeah.
just thought it was Arabic car. I thought it was an Arabic cartoon.
Hmm.
So I'm seeing this. I'm seeing Grandizer and all these other classics, and I was like, oh, this style looks so cool. It's so different. And I get back to the States that year and see Dragon Ball Z like trailers for it, and I get hooked. And I'm started, I'm seeing other things like Gundam. Gundam Wing gets brought over, and I just get hooked to that. And that's how I learned about anime. Get online and you start searching, and yeah, just something about that art style clicked. I would start drawing. I've always drawn. It just kind of comes to me. No one else in my family draws, which is interesting, except for my brother. But we had a knack for it. We wanted to do it, and yeah, I remember coming up with Super Saiyan forms and you name it. But yeah, so for the longest time, I thought anime was actually Arabic. I thought that was from the Middle
Wow.
East.
Wow.
So further research, I'm like, oh, these are from Japan, Japanese, and I'd go to the bookstore, start finding manga and getting introduced to those. I think Dot Hack Sign was the first manga I ever bought.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a really interesting. I like the style; it was different. So rest is history, I guess.
Wow, amazing. And I probably am going to put this pretty much in the YouTube bio as well, but is your knack for drawing what led you into architecture as well? Although, to be frank, that is sort of, it's similar but different at the same time. But is that sort of what pushed you in that direction?
Hmm. Yeah, actually, it was. I was looking for something where I could still, because I didn't want to just work any kind of job. I wanted something that I could utilize some artistic value in. So I went with architecture. And
Okay.
plus, my background, like, you've seen Ghost and Spirit. It's not the greatest
Hmm.
work of art by any means, and the backgrounds especially were horrible. So I thought this is a good way to learn, building structures and drawing environments and designs. So that's what led me into that career choice.
Wow, amazing. And is the architecture market booming at the moment? Or, I mean, we are all kind of struggling, but how do you find that? Like, do you find it,
Mm.
besides the monetary aspect, do you find it fulfilling as a career? Or is it just a sort of stepping stone for you to maybe take on drawing manga full time or doing something else?
Um, it is so before it was just, I had a phase in college where I kind of dropped art. I stopped working at Ghost and Spirit, and university life gets very busy, and especially with architecture students, building models and whatnot. So I kind of lost the drive for art for a couple of years there. And I think it wasn't until the job I was in previously, the firm I was at, I started feeling like stagnant. There wasn't a lot of design going on. It was mostly, you were kind of like a cog in a machine, just adding details to things. And then I started, watching new anime again, and getting that spark lit back up in me. And then I stumbled upon Berserk from by Kentaro Miura, the late sensei. He his work just ignited a fire in me, and I was like, the art of that manga was so beautiful and so detailed. I wanted to do something like, I wanted to make something more fulfilling than what Ghost in Spirit was. So I actually went back and finished Ghost in Spirit while on the side practicing and retraining my art, trying to come back to make something new. And during that time, I had been really studying Islam and Arabic history. And I was like, oh, how do I combine these two things that I'm like learning and putting all in together? And that's kind of how Sacrifice came to be.
Wow, that is amazing. And it's although it is amazing, it's something that I think many artists who are Muslim go through. Like many of us, although we're born Muslim, we literally became Muslim again later on in life because we actually
I would agree.
Yeah, we took the study of Islam seriously, and then that also shaped many other choices that we ended up taking. When it comes to Muslim artists and Islamic art, if we can even call it that, whether it be because there is a growing number of Islamic themed manga or Islamic themed TV shows, I think
it's definitely been blowing up lately.
Yeah, blowing up to the point I'd say maybe even getting somewhat saturated. So maybe 5 years down the line, the whole thing of, this whole Arabic setting sort of thing will become a drawn out cliche. So I'm not saying yours is, by the way, yours is amazing. I'm not just saying that because we know each other, but Sacrifice has been amazing so far. But what is your advice to, you're welcome, up and coming Muslim artists? How can they not be cliche? And maybe what are some other settings we can explore besides the usual Arab, Indian-esque, or something along that line? Because Islamic history is vast. There's so many cultures across the world that have historically been Muslim. And not only that, but Islam is for all places and times. I mean, Botswana is not a Muslim majority country, for example, but there's a lot that I find in Botswana culture that is very much synonymous with the teachings of the Quran and the living tradition of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So, yeah, basically that. How can we not be cliche going forward?
I would say don't worry too much about being cliche or not. It would be more of don't be afraid of putting your own interpretation on things. So like I've seen a lot of convert stories, people who've come into the fold of Islam and they kind of throw away the previous culture they came from. And I think that's a big mistake. Because like you said, Islam it's for all. It's made to easily mesh and grow with other cultures, I think, at least. And I think our history shows that it does. So for example, I think what would be cliche would doing anything of the Orientalist kind of imagery where, everything's overly exotic and people are more barbaric, and that kind of 80s view of like Arabs and the Middle Ages, if you will, or even now they still, some people. Yeah. But I would say stay away from Orientalist kind of imagery and ideas. I think that's where it's problematic. But I mean, there are some things that stem from actual, circumstances and situations in real life, but I would encourage someone, if they're getting into it, combine the cultures that are around them with what they know about Islam and see what that gives birth to. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely amazing. And I just remembered, so there's this YouTuber I follow. His name is Hakim. He's from Iraq. You'd never pick that up, by the way, except for the times that he does say that he's from Iraq, because he's got a full-on American accent and he speaks pretty much flawless
Okay.
English. Yeah, so he made a critique about Aladdin, the original animated movie, not that live action, whatever that was, man. But yeah, I mean the original animated movie from the 90s. And yeah, I had such a laugh watching that, because yeah, he tore it apart because of all the tropes that you find. And yeah, and you know, the whole fact of how Agrabah doesn't even look like it's supposed to be anywhere in Arabia, because the architecture is full on Indian, because it looks like a rip off Taj Mahal and all that. And yeah,
It does.
yeah, and the place is literally in the middle of a desert, and historically cities were
Desert.
never
It wouldn't work.
built like
Yeah.
that. So yeah,
Yeah.
all that
How
stuff.
could they have built any of that structure? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
hilarious.
So yeah, maybe I'll send you a link to that after we're done here. But yeah, I absolutely had a had a laugh watching that thing. And the sad part of it though is that it's true. I mean, even though at least myself, I remember growing up watching Aladdin as well. Then later you grow up and like,
I loved it growing up.
yeah, absolutely. And then you're like, hold on, this isn't exactly accurate and stuff like that.
Right, you start growing up, you mature, and you're like, oh, looking back at it, it's funny. But
Yeah.
as a kid, I loved it because it was just like, oh, something that shows,
Oh yeah.
Arabic culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But I guess that also goes to show, I mean, coming away from the Aladdin example, every single artist will be a product of their time. So maybe you're rewatching an episode of your favorite anime from the 80s, for example, and then you'll find some joke there that doesn't sit well with you because it's by today's standards, or even not just by today's standards, by common sense standards, it's misogynistic. It's just because back then we never spoke about this sort of thing as often or as openly. But that doesn't mean you have to cancel the animators or the
Right.
people who directed that anime, because they might even
100%.
be dead for all we care. But I think that's something that a mature artist has to sort of pick up, that people are products of their time. Maybe generations down the line, our art will also be looked at, and then it'll rub people the wrong way as well. And that's fine. I mean, I've reviewed on this podcast Castle in the Air by Diana Wynne Jones, and it's fantastically written. It's part of the Howl's Moving Castle series, and Howl's Moving Castle is an anime film as well. But the book kind of goes in a different direction, but it's cool. So then the sequel, Castle in the Air, is very Orientalist. It's got all those sort of tropes, but at the same time, it's a book that came out in like 1986 or 1990. And I don't blame Diana Wynne Jones being the old white Welsh lady that she was for really, I guess, not knowing as much as us when it comes to Arab culture or Islamic culture or what have you. It was still a good book, though, at the end of the day. It was well written. It had a nice plot, although there was one part that was really silly, but I've got my full review about that. I don't need to cancel Diana Wynne Jones. She's passed on, and it doesn't take away my enjoyment of her other works like Howl's Moving Castle and the other sequel, House of Many Ways, and anything else that she's written. She was the inspiration to J.K. Rowling, who went on and wrote Harry Potter. So goes to show how monumental her works were. So yeah, and I don't know if you've got anything to add on that front in terms of artists being products of their time.
It's kind of just a fact of nature. You have to accept that. And like you said, especially in their time period, the level of research you would have to do to get something outside of what you see on TV at that time. And, and even library books, I would say, like going to the library and picking up books at that era, there would be a lot of biases in them. It's not like the internet today. You can look up anything you want and find whatever you want. Back then you'd have to travel, you have to really, get into a place and experiment. And so like you said, I wouldn't, it'd be wrong to cancel such people today, and it wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be right, I don't think. And sometimes like I don't want to make myself sound horrible, but sometimes some of those old jokes that are pretty mean, they still are funny.
Yeah.
They don't always age well. Sometimes, you have to appreciate the time. You have to appreciate the times.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. And I think one of my other friends was once upon a time, he was saying that I think the fact that the joke is offensive is kind of what makes it funny sometimes, not
Yeah,
always, but
exactly.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
humor. That's humor for you.
yeah, absolutely. And I think,
Something funny. I didn't know Castle in the House Moving Castle was
uh,
a book originally until I saw your review on it. I was like,
oh
oh
wow,
shoot, this was a book because I thought you were reviewing the anime. I was like, oh, this is different. It was interesting to hear the differences. And
yeah,
yeah, so
absolutely.
I had no idea until that video. So
Oh, alhamdulillah. Well, I've been meaning to sort of maybe do a sort of review of the film as well, and then say this is what worked for me in the film, and that didn't really. I mean, I preferred the book in that version, and so on and so forth. But then I don't know. I kind of slept on that idea after season one. I don't know if I should. What do you reckon, bro?
hey, I mean, if you got a lot of books up your in your head of yours, you could maybe have like a separate series book reviews or something, or maybe a comparison series of different things,
Yeah, yeah.
like Harry Potter books versus the Harry Potter movies,
Oh,
which I know they have quite the differences too.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Although, I mean, Harry Potter's got 7 books, so that might
Yeah,
it's a
that's hefty.
yeah, that's a project. But at least okay, with Howl's Moving Castle, it's literally well, it's got 3 books which I've read. I think I've read all of them 8 times. So yeah, I had time
Wow,
to I had time
mashallah.
during COVID. I had time during COVID, alhamdulillah. So
Oh yeah, yep,
yeah. So yeah, I guess I'll go over the movie and inshallah
that'd
future
be cool.
content. Yeah. No,
Heck yeah.
yeah, shukran, inshallah. And okay, coming back now to yourself and art, did you ever feel yourself sort of directed a different way because of your artistic sense? I can't speak much to how Arab families or Lebanese families operate, but with since my father he hails from India, like if you go up that way,
Hmm.
and my mom's from another part altogether. So with us, although my dad's not like this, and anyone from his family is not like this, there's a joke that you can only be 2 things, doctor or engineer. And if you try to sort of break that mold, you are at many times violently, not physically violently, but in a mental sort of way, brought back in line. So do
Hmm.
you have any sort of similar experience with family growing up? You yourself being an artistic person
Yeah,
and yeah.
there's definitely you still will find that even in Lebanon where it's very. I think they're a lot more open to the arts than a lot of the other Arabic countries. But you'll still, it's kind of like, when a parent will see their kid, they're like, why don't you want to do this instead? Like, I know my brother got a lot of pushback for that because he was pursuing art much more seriously than I was at that time. And, the family would tell him, like, be a doctor, be an engineer, the cliches. Uh, and nowadays it's like, I think lawyers, or no, what are they trying to be? Real estate.
Well,
Real estate's the big thing. Like with Lebanese people, they're just like, do real estate, quick money. But yeah, there was some pushback, but I think architecture was kind of like that lucky balance where it's like I can do this, and then if that other thing takes off, I could, you know, go full force with that. Which, inshallah, we could see that day come. But for now, it's still kind of the stepping stone for me.
inshallah.
And yeah,
Yeah, inshallah. I mean, may
yeah,
Allah make it fruitful for you is all I can say. But
inshallah, inshallah.
yeah, I mean, but I think one other question that stems from that is basically, are you not then sort of, I don't know if fear is the word, but we know that if you're a full-time creative, it's got its own sort of challenges. Because I'm looking at it from the sort of YouTubing perspective. A lot of people have asked me ever since the podcast took off, would you be a full-time YouTuber, full-time podcaster? And I'm like, bro, right now I work, well, office is closed, but when I do go to work, it's from 8 to 5. And then after that, I do whatever the hell I want, whether
Hmm.
it's working on this podcast or just watching Netflix the rest of the night. But when you're a full-time creative, your working hours are from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. on the next day. And if you even get any sleep, you're lucky to get that. That's what a lot of YouTubers are saying nowadays. I understand being a mangaka might be different. And it's not Japan where you actually have to put in a manga script every single week because of Weekly Shonen Jump or
Yep.
something. So I understand it's different, But are you also not sort of looking at it from that angle that, yeah, I'd leave my, day job and I'd have more time to spend at home with my family, with my child, but there's also that thing that's staring at me from the abyss.
Especially when bills get involved and
Yeah.
house payments and yeah. So like right now, I would say it's like more of a hobby. It's at the level of like a hobby, a hobby I would be taking very seriously. And I think that's a good way for a lot of people to start, because it's especially with things like creative, going into YouTube and stuff like things you're doing. First of all, you have to have that level of charisma. You have to be brave and ready to fail, because a lot of people will probably fail in the beginning. So it's not easy. So if you don't have something to fall back on, you need to. So I would start those kind of things off with like at hobby level. Take it seriously as a hobby, and then see where you can, grow a following. And although being a lawyer sounds pretty cool, like I don't know if you would ever consider leaving it if this really took off to like millions of views, and what you would do about that, because there's more responsibility, I want to say, like being a lawyer, like these are laws that people are going to be, I don't know, there's a weight to it. I guess architecture, there's a weight to it too, but I feel like, if someone doesn't like it, they'll tear down a building and build a new one. Laws, you got to wrestle with.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Most of my daily work, obviously law is diverse, but my bread and butter is literally chasing down people who don't pay rent. Like that's the bulk of what I do. And yeah, I've been told, I can speak for Botswana because that's the only place I've practiced in, that this is a common thing in our nation. So yeah, if you're a lawyer who's into that, then you've got your daily bread and butter sorted, alhamdulillah. At the same time though, when I was interviewed for my current job, my current boss actually went and he checked out my episode with Momodou Tal, and he said he was impressed.
Nice.
So it also does wonders when it comes to actually applying for a quote unquote real job. I don't like that term, but I think everyone understands what I'm trying to get at when I use that term.
Yeah.
So yeah, as of like right now where I am, it's quite comfy, doing the law thing and then doing this on the side. When it comes to monetization, Botswana doesn't have YouTube monetization as of yet, and that's not something I can change on my own. Yeah, that's got to do with laws and stuff. Like the government has to pass.
Well, perfect. You're in the law. So maybe one day you can.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
write the books on that.
Yeah. When you put it that way, okay, sure, I could definitely shake something up. But yeah, so yeah, even if my videos got 1 million views tomorrow, I wouldn't be getting paid anytime soon.
That's
so
crazy.
to speak. Yeah.
I didn't think about it. I just assumed it was like this. I don't know how it works. I'm not a YouTuber, but I would have assumed it just, oh, here are the views, you're getting ad revenue.
Yeah.
We'll PayPal you or something.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it works in other countries. That's how it works in Zimbabwe, my neighbor. That's how it works in South Africa. Also my neighbor. It just doesn't exist in Botswana yet because of, because of bureaucracy, basically. So yeah, it is what it is though.
Wow.
I do have hopes, inshallah, and in fact, I have faith that this little project that I started will, inshallah, take off to even further heights, and I'm all here for it. And even if it's not called the Scholar and the Student podcast by the time it takes off, I would really love to see what it is called and exactly how far it can go, because I've only seen good from it, alhamdulillah. And for the few weird messages that I get at 3 a.m. telling me I'm destroying the unity of the ummah, that was also good, because that showed me that I don't need to be hanging out with such people anymore. It gave me the confidence to sort of step away from that whole line or group that I was previously affiliated with, alhamdulillah. So it's been part of my development as well, and that's just how life goes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I still go over some of my episodes of season 1 and season 2. I recorded a lot of season 1, I think in 2019, 2020, as the pandemic was setting in. And as I look back and I look at what I'm putting out now, I'm like, well, I really stepped out of my shell and I've become literally a different person. And we're stepping into a new year. It's in literally less than an hour. It's going to be 2023 here. And I can say, inshallah,
Oh shoot.
yeah, it's going to be another wild
Yeah, I
ride.
still got half a day. I've got half a day over on this side of the world, but
Yeah.
Happy New Year to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, the people in Japan and Korea, all my friends and relatives that
They
like,
priority.
yeah, when it was 5 p.m. here, they were already showing me fireworks and stuff. I'm like, okay, yeah, almost, I'm almost there.
We'll
Inshallah.
get there. We'll get there.
Yeah. It's still the same planet. We'll get there all
Yeah.
eventually. Inshallah.
Yeah. It's so crazy. It's incredible, really.
Absolutely. Alhamdulillah, brother Kaito Lumiere, we've been going on, I am assuming, for about an hour. I've got nowhere to tell time on this thing, but this is the part of the podcast where I hand it over to you to ask me a question or series of questions about the podcast, Botswana, or anything. Although, for you, it's kind of a cheat because you and I speak on Instagram and other things on a regular basis and have been for a long time. But if there's something else you want to put me on the spot for right now, go ahead, bro. It's your moment to shine.
There is. I've actually been saving this question for this. And it's perfect the way you, the last thing you said about, getting kind of hate messages, oh, you're breaking the ummah. I was going to ask if you've noticed, I guess, how your podcast has affected the area you're in. If you've noticed anybody has anyone ever stopped you and said aren't you that guy on YouTube, or has it gone to that point yet? Are you seeing any advertisements for you, or people saying oh, we want to let people know this is the first podcast here? And I've been curious. I want to know.
Yeah, interesting question. So I would say, so it hasn't gotten to the point where I'm I'm walking in the mall and then someone stops me like that. But yeah, there has been a point when I went to one of the biggest masjids here in Gaborone, in our capital city, one of the oldest masjids as well. So I was just there minding my own business. I was there with some other friends, and one of my friend's younger brother, who was about 18, so he was chilling with some of his other age mates, and my friend and I, we had made our way back to the car, and then his brother came, who's still 18. He came and said, hey, that friend of mine said that he saw you on YouTube. He doesn't know who you are, but he saw you on YouTube. So that's the only connection that he has. And today he saw you praying in the masjid. So yeah, stuff like that. Also,
it's interesting that he is 18.
Yeah,
it's always that younger gen who finds this stuff first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I recently met up with a good friend of mine. We went to I think you call it elementary school together. We say primary school. So yeah, we went to high school together as well, but then we kind of went our separate ways. So I met him after a long time, and he said that some of his other friends, whom I have no idea who they are, they were actually checking out my stuff on Facebook. And he looked at them, he's like, hey, you follow that? And yeah, we listen to this guy. And he's like, yeah, I went to school with him. So there was a sort of bragging moment for him over there. Also, one of my friends, Ishaq, he's practically my producer. He was on my podcast on episode 3 of season 1, Islam and Art. So he was on that. He has been stopped in the masjid. This is going on to the hate mail sort of territory. He's been stopped in the masjid, and they're like, yo, is that friend of yours okay with the stuff he says on air? And yeah, what's up with him? What's he doing walking around with earrings and all that sort of stuff? And he's like, yeah. So he basically brushed it off in his own sort of way. So yeah, there are elements of that. Apparently, there are even people who download my episodes from Facebook, because there's a way to do that. I didn't know, but you can download Facebook videos. I'm talking about people who aren't even Muslim. So, alhamdulillah, there seems to be a sort of
it's the fire's starting to catch.
Yeah, absolutely. There is definitely a sort of element. I wouldn't say that I've struck gold, or I've definitely sort of, done that whole cultural revolution thing that I'm aiming to do, but I'm definitely pushing in that direction. And I think slowly but surely things are happening. And not just from everything I do, but I'm seeing that even the way sort of Allah is guiding certain people to do certain things or come out of certain places, I think it's just getting easier. That momentum is building for me to sort of make an impact on the world. I don't want to convert everyone to Islam, or I don't want to, how should I say, convert everyone to looking at things the way I do, because even most Muslims have issues with me, I assume. But that being said, what I'm trying to do here is talk about things which aren't usually spoken about and sort of bring a different flavor to what Muslims do, because it's not just about having a big
Spice
beard.
it up.
Yeah, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. And I do believe that even people like us, even though we don't get the most views and we are practically the minority, but we deserve to be heard. So that this is us showing ourselves to the world and broadcasting our message to the world that this is us. So take notice. You're either with us, or what is it that Ishaq always says? You are either with us, love us, or hate us. You're still thinking about us. So Bismillah.
Bismillah. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
Well, that's how it always starts, word of mouth, the beginning of it all, and it's clearly going around. So that's pretty cool.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. I really enjoyed talking to you face to face, bro. And yeah, I think I
Yeah, it was about time.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. I think I once mistakenly pushed the video call on the Instagram DM thing. I often do that. I've done it to so many people. So yeah, apologies for that.
Same. It's too easy.
Yeah,
It's okay.
absolutely. But I really enjoyed talking to you face to face and inviting you to Botswana virtually. I'd like to invite you physically as well, though, bro. I've done that before. I'm doing it again right now.
Inshallah one day. Inshallah one day.
Inshallah, definitely. And yeah, where can my audience find you? Which socials are you on? And after you tell us where to find you, give us some parting words of advice or anything else, brother.
Okay. You can find me on Instagram at Kaito Lumiere. I'm sure you'll have it somewhere in the description or something. That's basically where I post all my art and updated information. You can find my manga Sacrifice on Webtoons. I guess I do have a little bit of an announcement to make if you'll let me.
Oh, go ahead, Bismillah.
Okay. So I had received a digital drawing tablet this year, and with it, it's really revolutionized my art going forward. And looking back at I would say recently I just hit 700 views with the chapter 1. I've decided to, I don't want to say restart, but I'm looking at chapter 1 as a one-shot now. And so in the coming weeks, I'll be reposting chapter 1, starting anew. I'll keep it online. I'm going to rename it as One Shot. And an official re-release is coming out, fully redrawn. I've already got like 7 new pages added. There's a lot more coming, different scenes, different interactions between characters that we didn't get to see in chapter 1 really. So I'm excited to announce that, and I apologize for those of you waiting for chapter 2, but we're going to get there. But this is just to enrich the experience. It's to tie into key elements that I've been writing with chapter 2. So I think this will allow for a better story, a better flow, and better art too.
Yeah, amazing.
So,
I'm also yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was saying I am excited just hearing that announcement, because I've been following the webtoon since, I don't know since when, but I have been following it like a hawk. So yeah, to know that there's more coming, or an enriched experience coming, yeah, that is absolutely out of this world. So you're doing it, bro, as Mufti always says.
I think I've added enough that you'll appreciate the differences.
Yeah.
Like it will definitely not feel like the same experience. There's a theme I'm tying in now.
Wow.
That's going to properly like push the series moving forward, as I've written more scripts and come up with ideas. So it will not be the same experience. hopefully a
Wow.
better one.
Wow. Absolutely look forward to it, brother, inshallah. And yeah,
Allah.
so everyone, whether you're watching or listening to this, go and check out that webtoon right now. His old work is also there, Ghost and Spirit. And yeah, go give him a follow on Instagram and spread the message of positivity and love, inshallah. And it's just a few
Inshallah.
minutes left until 2023 comes down my way. So whether you celebrate or not, at least take this time, inshallah, to sort of look back on the high points and the low points of the previous year and see what worked for you, what didn't, how can you be an even better person in 2023 and beyond. With that, we
Inshallah.
take our leave, inshallah. And brother Kaito, assalamu alaikum to the viewers and the
Alaikum salam.
listeners. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace out. We're not going anywhere. Season 3 will continue. And yeah, even after that, we'll still continue with season 4, inshallah. That's not a spoiler, but yes, it's happening, inshallah. So yeah, much love and stay blessed. Assalamu alaikum, brother Kaito. Much love to you, inshallah.
Thank you.
We'll be speaking literally after I finish this recording on Instagram and wherever.
Heck yeah.
So,
All right.
thank you very much for seeing this through to the end. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Give us a 5-star rating if you're using an audio platform. All of these things drive up the algorithm, as well as commenting, so let us know how it was for you. A special shout out once again to our sponsors, Alpha House of Fashion, Baseline Media Intellects, and Batch by ZAHRA. The Ko-fi and Patreon links for donations are live and down below. Remember to donate only if you have the means to do so. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum. Peace.